And good day, everybody. Welcome on in, episode 141 of the Talking Friars podcast and YouTube show, brought to you by Gaglione Bros, famous cheesesteaks and subs, located in Point Loma, located Sports Arena, located at Petco Park, third deck, field level. Go get your cheesesteaks and garlic fries starting April 14th against Matt Olson and the Atlanta Braves at Petco, and then those two locations that I mentioned. Visit GaglioneBros.com to view their entire menu. What is going on, Padres fans? Maybe some Mets fans are in here just wanting to listen to a live show here. I appreciate everyone for hopping on in here to the YouTube live show. If you're listening on the podcast version, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, I appreciate that as well. Again, welcome on in. Ben Fadden here. The news of the day, the San Diego Padres and the New York Mets were engaged on a trade that involved Eric Hosmer, Emilio Pagan, Chris Paddock, and Dom Smith, and the trade ended up falling apart. Give me your thoughts, what you're thinking in this very moment. Give me your thoughts in the comments on YouTube. I just want to see the pulse. What is the pulse of the Padres fan base? What is the pulse of the Mets? Some Mets fans that might, come trickling in on here. Again, we got a lot to discuss here. As we're waiting for some people to trickle on in, hit that subscribe button, follow the YouTube channel or subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow Talking Friars on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok for all the updates you need on the San Diego Padres, all things San Diego Padres. If you have any suggestions that you want to be on the show, let me know. This is a show for you guys, for Padres fans. I love discussing the team with you guys, and so let's just get your thoughts, your initial thoughts. There's some stuff to talk about Manny Machado and the MLB Network Top 100 Players list that was finalized last night, and we'll get into that quickly before discussing Hosmer, just to let some more people go in on here, come on the stream. But first off, let's just get some initial reaction. Johnny Cage here says the Mets didn't want that Hosmer contract. That's definitely what it seems like. The Padres were offering, it seemed like, to eat pretty much half of Hosmer's $59 million remaining on the deal, but the Mets ended up saying, it's not worth it to eat Hosmer's contract and probably end up releasing him or dealing him somewhere else just to get Chris Paddock to be maybe in the rotation, at the back end of the rotation, to help replace DeGrom, because Paddock's nowhere near DeGrom, but they didn't think that it was worth it, and we're definitely going to get into that. One says, I knew this was going to fall through. That's what it seemed like when Kevin Acee came out with that tweet, and we'll get to that timeline of events that happened today. Nando390 says, Hosmer won't be traded unless the Padres eat a ton of that contract, and that's what it seems like. I think them eating half of that salary was fine. I think that they weren't putting in. They made it clear probably that they weren't going to include Robert Hassett III or Mackenzie Gore or C.J. Abrams. And so when that happened, and the Mets, all they were getting back was Pagan and then Paddock coming off an injury. That's where they probably didn't want to do that. So we're gonna get that. Trust me, we're gonna get into. This would have been a dumb deal for the Mets. Why it fell through. Why some people are mad at A.J. Preller for some reason. I saw that on Twitter, and I don't understand that at all. But we'll get to all of that. But first, see, Angel says here, one of Preller's many mistakes. I don't really understand how this is a big mistake for him, but we'll get into that. Share your thoughts. I'd love to see everyone's thoughts here. But first off, just letting some more people trickle on in here. Let's talk about Manny Machado. Where he was ranked on MLB Network's Top 100 list. It came out yesterday. He was ranked 18th ahead of Nolan Arenado. Nolan was 19th. And so I'm glad. I'm glad that he was ranked ahead of Nolan finally. It seems like average baseball fans, you think of third baseman, the first third baseman you think of is Nolan Arenado because of all the gold gloves, all the flashy plays and all that. But Manny is the better player, at least right now. He might not be as flashy, and he makes the plays look easy, while that's not really the case with Nolan. So that might be a reason why he's not as high on the average fans list. but he was finally on MLB Network's The Shredder list, and so I'm definitely happy about that, and he deserves it. Machado had a better batting average, better on-base percentage, better WOBA, weighted runs created plus, and better WAR last season. He has a WAR 2 wins better than Machado, Machado had a WAR 2 wins better than Arenado the last 2 seasons combined. Tatis was another Padre that was ranked actually ahead of Manny and Nolan. He was ranked third behind Trout and Ohtani. Ohtani was ranked as the best player in the league. I believe so. Trout number 2. But he was in front of Soto, Bryce Harper, Betts, DeGrom, Vlad Jr., Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna Jr. That was the top 10. Fernando deserves it. Just one of the best players in the league, faced the league. But just wanted to cover that. Look, and then cover quickly Padres Royals last night. Grisham, that was my main takeaway from the game real quick. That was my main takeaway. Grisham, first 2 at-bats, homer, double, first 2 extra base hits of spring. I saw some tweets that he's really getting hot here, and so that's definitely some good news going into the season. Like the first 2 weeks, his at-bats there didn't matter. They don't even matter really right now, but it's just good to see him, getting some results. I know it's spring training, but at least getting some results, that's always good. But again, you're here right now to discuss Eric Hosmer and the New York Mets deal not happening, it falling through. And let's get to some of the chain of events that happened, the chronological events that happened that led to this deal falling through. It started on Friday night. I was sleeping. I'm on the East Coast here in New York for college, and so I was sleeping when this happened. So I woke up this morning, and I was like, holy cow, are you kidding me? Like, you're seeing, because this is before the deal was dead, obviously, and I was seeing, John Heyman saying that they're making a lot of progress. They're deep in talks on a deal, likely to be traded, and then obviously he ends up not being dealt. But Friday at 11 p.m. Pacific time, Dennis Lin reported that the Mets and the Padres have discussed a trade involving Dominic Smith, Eric Hosmer, and Chris Paddock. That was the initial report. And then earlier today, Joel Sherman of the New York Post reported that the Mets would also be getting Emilio Pagan in a potential deal, along with Hosmer and Paddock. And so that even made, I think, Padre fans even happier, because Emilio Pagan, obviously, they look at him, they remember him giving up that big home run against Tyler O'Neill and the Cardinals during that whole Tatis-Manny fight series in St. Louis last year. They look at Pagan, who gave up 3 home runs in 1 inning to the Los Angeles Dodgers, including Mookie Betts, I think Muncy and Bellinger in September last year. So they think of that. They think of him sucking in one of his appearances earlier this spring training. So they're like, really? We get Hosmer off of our hands? That guy, the guy that just smashed the front office, in public, in, quotes, in a quote that he said to Kevin Acee a matter of weeks ago, saying, they wouldn't have treated him like this in Kansas City, but I'm not in Kansas City anymore. I'm in San Diego. This is just how things are run here. They don't let players know that they're in trade talks, I guess. And that whole argument, by the way, that was happening is that Hosmer should have been let known and all that. Okay, if you want to go with that, okay, sure. But guess what? There's a thing called Twitter. There's a thing called Instagram. There's a thing called TikTok or MLB Network that is on in every clubhouse. I think Hosmer knew that his name was going to be in trade talks. I don't think they need the front office necessarily to go up to Eric Hosmer and say, we're going to be involving you in trade talks. Everyone in the whole world knows that you're going to be in trade talks, Eric. I don't understand why that really needed to happen, and Hosmer needed to be alerted that he was going to be in trade talks. He knew that he was going to be in trade talks. It's all over the place. Is Paddock whining in public right now that his name was floated, or Pagan? I don't think so. I haven't seen any of that. It's Hosmer. He's the one that's doing that. And it's like, do you deserve – it's not like you're Tatis and you're the star player who's helped the Padres win a lot of games, at his small amount of time with the Padres, and he's producing this 5 or 6 WAR, like a 5 WAR like Manny did last year. That would be one thing. Okay, maybe you should have a conversation with Manny. But when you're producing a 1 WAR or a 0 WAR, according to some other baseball sites, not including, I think, Baseball Reference, if you're not producing like that, why should you get special treatment? You're making all this money, but you're not living up to it. Why should you be getting the special treatment? So maybe I just went off on a tangent there, but that was just something that pissed me off, earlier this offseason as well that I wanted to repeat. But again, Lynn reported on Friday night that this deal proposal had been discussed. Sherman says Pagan could have been involved. And so that was going to make a lot of fans happy, right? That Pagan, who, was batting practice at the end of last year, and Hosmer, who's just been a headache and, just really bad defensively, they would be able to get rid of both of them. Now, I'm a big Paddock fan. Anyone that knows me personally, I think they know that I'm a big Paddock fan, so I wouldn't have liked to see him go. But if that meant that, Eric Hosmer would have been gone and they would have got Dom Smith, sign me up. They have Mackenzie Gore being developed really well by Ruben Niebla, right? Really well. And so it seems like Gore is going to end up being a better pitcher than Chris Paddock. He's a lefty. That's something that's a little unique. So it seems like he would have lessened the blow of losing Chris Paddock. I know Chris Paddock would have been a depth piece, and it looks like he's going to piggyback, if he's still on the team, with Blake Snell the first time, couple times through the rotation this year. Then if injuries happen or something like that, then maybe he goes into the rotation. So he would have impacted the team, at least at the start of the year. So it would have kind of sucked a little bit to see him go. He is a depth option, but now that he's still here, that still makes me happy. But obviously, you would have liked to see Hosmer go. I wouldn't have, been mad if Pagan went either. They would have saved money, a little bit of money there. Obviously, he struggled last year. I think he would have been better this year, and I think he will be better this year. It seems like he's going to be with the Padres now, so I think he's going to be better this year because of the adjustments that it seems like he's made according to Dennis Lynn's piece. But if he was dealt, I wouldn't have been that mad. They have Robert Suarez. They have Luis Garcia coming back at some point this year. Lamet looks pretty good in the bullpen this year. He could be a closer option. They have Kevin Kopps, who's looked really good. Ian Kroll. I know this name, his name isn't huge, but he looks pretty dang good right now. They have Steven Wilson, Nabil Chrismat, Tim Hill, Stammen. I could name them on and on. Austin Adams. You would think that he wouldn't hit the world this year, right? So I would have been pretty confident even without Pagan in the bullpen. And so I think this sucks that they weren't able to do this, but I guess we could get right into AJ Preller. I don't understand. There's some people that I saw earlier today, on, social media and all that, saying that they're mad at AJ Preller for not making this move. Some people saying that they're mad, they're angry. Fans need to demand more, stop being complacent, that the GM needs to go. He's a great scout, but not a GM. I don't understand where all of this hate is coming from in terms of AJ Preller right now, because the fact of the matter is the deal that was proposed today that didn't end up happening, this deal would have been great for the Padres. It would have sucked for the Mets. It would have been great for the Padres. They're getting back Dom Smith, who they could have put into left field, be a power bat in left field. They could have gotten rid of Hosmer, who's just been pretty much a cancer. They would have gotten rid of Pagan, who was giving up home runs left and right at the end of last year. They would have saved a lot of money, and we'll get into that a little bit later, which would have allowed them to maybe go make a deal and be more confident in getting someone like, I don't know, Brian Reynolds or Michael Conforto. But now, with that deal not being taken place, they still have, I think, a little less than $6 million of room left before the luxury tax $230 million number happened. They hit that number, and then Seidler gets taxed 30% of however much they go over. So it definitely sucks that Dom Smith's not a Padre. I know he only hit 11 home runs last year. I know it was not the greatest of years for him, but he did face some injuries. And if he had consistent playing time, he would have been the left fielder. I think that would have been great for him. And it would have been somewhere where he'd got consistent playing time, somewhere that would have wanted him, because now that he's floated in trade talks, I don't know if he's going to feel so good to be with the Mets. Because guess what? I'm pretty sure it doesn't feel great to be floated in trade talks when you arguably could be starting for that team. And you could say the same thing for Hosmer and Pagan and Paddock, Well, Ben, it doesn't feel good to be floated in trade talks. I understand that. But I understand that for Paddock. I understand that for Pagan and their families. I don't want to involve their families in this. I don't even want to really involve them as people. But I'm just talking about their numbers and all of that. So I understand the family element, and that sucks to be, put in trade talks and not knowing where you're going to be and all that. I know that sucks. But from a player standpoint, it has to stink, for someone not to be wanted and then still have to be on the team for both sides. And I'll say that for both sides, the Mets and the Padres, the players involved. I will say that. But that's my initial thoughts right now. Again, John Heyman, more with the timeline, at 12:56 a.m. Pacific time today, he said the Padres are, quote, deep in talks, end quote, with the Mets on the Hosmer deal. Later said that Hosmer, quote, seems likely to be dealt elsewhere, end quote. Ends up not being dealt. He could be dealt. That's definitely fair. He could be dealt somewhere, but he's not dealt right now. And Kevin Acee then said at 2:18 p.m. Pacific time, Paddock, Pagan, and Hosmer were on the field. Paddock was throwing on the field, Pagan in the bullpen. Hosmer, was getting on the field, probably hitting BP. And he spent nearly an hour in the Padres executive offices before getting onto the field. So it seems like to me that whole, almost hour conversation, Preller was probably talking to him, saying that this deal's off. You're going to be a Padre to start the season, or at least for today, because things can always change. You're going to be a Padre, at least for right now. So I just wanted to tell you that and, go about your day. But again, until something happens, I don't think it's necessary to just continue to have to update Hosmer on it. He can look at social media, you can find it right there, it just doesn't make sense. It's not like he's the superstar that's contributing really well to the team and deserves the special treatment of being told every single thing that's happening in these negotiations and these possible trades. Look, I'm pretty sure, I guarantee you, Preller has engaged or tried to engage with at least a third of the league on a possible Eric Hosmer deal. So if he were to update Hosmer on every team that he's talking to and every situation that he's talking to, or every team that he's talking to, every situation that comes up, that's all that's going to be on Eric's mind. So is that really the best thing, to be talking to him and, really updating him on everything? Does Eric really want that? It's one thing to say it, but do you really want that? I don't know. Because let's be fair, if Preller was really updating him on everything that was going on, I think he'd be focused on the possible trade talks instead of saying, it's one team, we'll see what happens. No, it's probably a third of the league at least that he's engaged with. So I'm not quite sure that Hosmer really would want that communication until a deal is done. Until someone taps him on the shoulder and says, you're getting traded, what's the point? You're going to be in trade talks. You're not contributing to the team greatly. You're a hole on the roster right now. You haven't been great defensively ever since you came to the Padres. So I don't know how much sympathy I should feel for Hosmer not really being in, constant communication with AJ in the front office. If a deal gets done, a deal gets done. Okay? A deal gets done, then you'll be let known. You'll be let known that you're going elsewhere. Trust me. So again, that's pretty much the timeline. Joel Sherman at 2:55 p.m. Pacific time said the deal not being done, not going to happen. It's fallen through. And that's where we sit right now. So before we get into the whole contract thing and what would have been with Dom Smith and how much money the Padres would have saved and maybe what moves they would have made after that, let's get into some of these comments from the live show. Again, hit that subscribe button. I have a giveaway for anyone watching that isn't subscribed to the YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button at 3:45 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. I will be announcing on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok that someone will be going away with a Joe Musgrove 44 hat. I am partnering with a company that is giving away an Eric not an Eric Hosmer. I have Eric Hosmer on my mind. Giving away a Joe Musgrove number 44 hat. And so that giveaway will be done tomorrow. I will be picking at random, at 3:45 p.m. Pacific time and announcing it, who is winning that hat. And then I'll DM them. I'll get in touch with them, have them send me their address, and they will get that Joe Musgrove hat from Legacy Gives Back. You can look up on their Instagram page, Legacy Gives Back. Joe Musgrove's mom, Diane, I think, met that family and took a picture with those hats. And so that's one of those hats will be going to someone who subscribes to the YouTube channel. This YouTube channel right now, hit that subscribe button. It will be going to one person that subscribes to the channel before 3:45 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. So get that done, please, if you want a Joe Musgrove hat. He said, the person I got in touch with, he said that was the last one that he has. So if you want the last one in stock, hit that subscribe button. Let's get into the comments here. Randall, what's up, Randall? Hope you're doing well. This is not funny as a Padres fan. Yeah, it's not, because Hosmer's still on the team. They don't have as much flexibility. But, I mean, when you look at it from a Mets perspective, and we'll get to that, it was not a good deal for the Mets. It just wasn't. And here's a Mets fan, I think. Angie Temple says, you guys can keep Hosmer. Yeah, and I think Mets fans are slowly starting to realize that this was not a good move for them. That they would have given away someone who would probably start games in left field at some point during the season, someone that could DH, someone that could play left, someone who has 3 years of control left at a much smaller price than what Eric Hosmer's contract is at. The remaining 4 years left on that deal. And they know that Hosmer wasn't a fit. They have Pete Alonso there already. They have Robinson Cano there already, DHing. So that's not a fit. Alonso wasn't going to go DH. So that wasn't a fit. And then they said that the Mets might flip Hosmer if a deal would have happened. But were the Mets really going to be happy what they would have gotten back in a Hosmer deal? Because Hosmer just isn't the guy that he used to be. Going to Jason here with his Pagan points here. Pagan had a 14 ERA over his last 11 starts last season, but was solid in the first 4.5 months. Perhaps Tingler wore him out. That might be the case. I think when Larry Rothschild got fired before last season ended, and he was supposed to be like the scapegoat and all that. There were people saying, that the pitchers were overused and all that. The bullpen might have been overused. But part of that was because Blake Snell and other starters just weren't going long enough. And the Padres, at the beginning of the year, before they collapsed, they were in contention and they were trying to win games. And so when you have a starting pitcher out there not pitching well, not helping you stay in games, that, the manager, the pitching coach, their instincts is going to be to go to the bullpen. Bring in another pitcher, someone that's going to be better, and maybe keep them in a game and stop giving up a bunch of runs. So that might have contributed to why the bullpen last year was overused. I can definitely agree to that. Let's see, going through the comments here. Yeah, late April Fool's Day, I guess. I mean, no one said that the deal was done, but they did say that, John Heyman said that they're deep in talks. Hosmer likely to be dealt elsewhere from the Padres. Now, no one in terms of the April Fools, no one said that a deal was done. So not really, but excuse me. But yeah, it did give us a little false hope. Sorry, let me get a drink of water here. All right, let's see here. Jim Healy says, "Sheesh, will Haas ever leave? Once they find a deal for him, I think Preller's going to continue trying. I think for a deal to get done, they're probably going to have to include one of their top Hopefully it's not one of their top like 5 prospects, but if it's Campusano, I'm fine with that. If it's, I don't want to include James Wood, but if that's what a team is banking on and they really say, okay, give me James Wood, and you can still have Hassel and Gore and Abrams there, I think I'd be fine with that, gut instinct. So to answer that question, Jim, will Haas ever leave? I think if they don't get a deal after the trade deadline, or before the trade deadline, if they don't get a deal done before the trade deadline, I don't see him leaving because he has 10-5 rights, 10 years of playing time in the big leagues, and 5 years consecutively with the same team. You have no trade clause, so you can veto any possible trade. And I think Hosmer would want to stay because the Padres are going to be a contender for probably the rest of his contract. And wherever he goes, he might not be a contender there because contenders are not going to want him. Like the Mets, they're a contender this year. He wasn't a fit there. He was probably going to get flipped somewhere else, or if he stayed, he wasn't even a fit there. So teams that are contending, they don't actually want him. So that's the problem. Moving to Jason here. Hosmer's contract has a clause that says he can't be traded twice without his consent. So any team that trades for him may have to keep him. Hosmer's contract is untradeable. I agree that it's untradeable. They'd have to probably pay for like half of it. I don't know. This is the first time I'm hearing about his clause saying he can't be traded twice without his consent. I think he has 10 teams on a list that he can't be that he can veto, like it's a no trade list. And then once those 10-5 rights kick in after pretty much the trade deadline this year, he can veto any team. Let's see here. Jason says AJ Preller doesn't owe Hosmer any updates. AJ doesn't owe Hosmer a thing. I kind of agree with that because he's the one that gave Hosmer $144 million and overpaid for him and paid way more money than any other team was willing to do that. His own team, the Royals, weren't even willing to give him that. So he gave him a lot of money. And so, yeah, I think – and then he's not playing up to the contract at all. He's been worth less than $5 million of the 80 that he's earned in his first 4 years. So, yeah, I don't really think he owes Hosmer anything. He's given Hosmer the life-changing money. So, yeah, I understand. Randall asks, why do the Dodgers get what they want and we get a low end of the road? Well, I'll tell you this, because they don't care about going over the luxury tax. I'll say that. Because they're going to be way over it, I would think, the last time I checked. And the fact is, there's something different between the Dodgers and the Padres. The Dodgers have had a history of developing players really well and having them go impact their team at the major league level. AJ Preller, you look at these players on this team right now, Tatis traded for, Manny signed, even Hosmer signed, Cronenworth traded for, Kim signed. These guys weren't drafted. Weathers was drafted. Paddock traded for. Weathers was pretty much the only exception. Caratini traded for. Darvish traded for. Pham was traded for last year. Grisham traded for. Myers traded for. Pagan traded for. Tim Hill traded for, I think, in that Kansas City deal a couple years ago, right? Austin Adams traded for. Dan Altavilla didn't work out, but he was traded for. Drew Pomerantz signed in free agency, and they overpaid for him. Nick Martinez signed in free agency. It looks like they overpaid for him. Profar, they traded for him, and then they signed him and overpaid for him. Preller doesn't have a big history of developing guys and keeping them at the major league level and having them really impact the team. The Dodgers, on the hand, they have that history. That's the difference here. Because they can develop those guys at the major league level, they have those guys on major league deals and have those guys pretty much paid not at maximum salaries like the Padres have to do because they're not developed there. They're signing them through free agency. The Dodgers are paying them at rookie deals like Bellinger, like Taylor before the big contract, like Kershaw when he first debuted, right? Like Buehler, like Julio Urias, like Dustin May. I could keep going down the list. Max Muncy is another one that, look, I know they didn't draft him, but they took him, out of nothing from Oakland, and they pretty much homegrown, essentially. They developed him. Same with Justin Turner, who was, not who the Mets gave up on. So they have a history of bringing up guys, drafting guys like Walker Buehler from Vanderbilt, like Kershaw, bringing them up, developing them, and then, look, guess what? They end up really impacting the team. Will Smith, their catcher, is another example. So while they also have guys like Craig Kimbrell that they just traded for, or Blake Trinan that wasn't, I don't think, drafted by them, they still have way more guys that they really developed and they drafted. Guys like that, they drafted them. They developed them. I think that's a big difference. And when you develop those guys, you don't have to overpay for them, right? You don't have to spend on them. You have them on their rookie deals initially, and that's why you can use money elsewhere, and it helps being in a bigger market as well, but it also helps that you can have those guys on lower salaries, and you can use that money that you'd have to pay on them to go get Freddie Freeman. You see what I'm saying? Or go sign Trevor Bauer. Bauer's not working, but they gave him $40 million a year. Why? Because they could afford it, because they had a lot of other guys on rookie deals that they drafted and developed. That's not really the case with the Padres. So that's to answer your question, Randall. Let's see. Patrick comments, is the Cubs trade still in talks? The Cubs were mentioned by John Heyman. It seems like they're the next team that we could go down the line and say, hey, are the Padres interested in them, right? Or are the Padres interested in dealing to the Cubs? Are the Cubs interested in Hosmer, right? That's pretty much the next team I would go to, right? But I have not heard anything, at least right now, of the Cubs. Now that the Mets deal didn't happen, they're going all in on Hosmer. I haven't heard that. Just checking Twitter here to see if we have any updates. No, I do not see anything here. Don't see anything. All right, let's see. Coming down to, okay, let's go to JD here. JDS Third says, AJ Tingler and Preller need to go, or AJ Tingler Preller needs to go. I see what you did there. His expiration date is 2 years past its due date. I don't know about 2 years. I mean, if it was 2 years past its due date, we wouldn't have Jake Cronenworth on the team. We wouldn't have Tatis extended for the next 13 years, right? And we'd have Manny, but we wouldn't have Musgrove, right? Yeah, we would, because that was before 2020. But I don't know about 2 years past its due date. And look, I mentioned this on previous episodes. Peter Seidler, he trusts AJ Preller. He has faith in him. He's already said on the radio before the season's even started during spring training that AJ Preller is not on the hot seat. He's essentially saying it's not we need to win this year mode. That's not what he views. And so if they don't even win this year, if they don't make it competitive in the National League Division Series, I think he should go then. I think that's the bar. I think that's where it needs to be, assuming that Tatis is healthy then and the rotation's healthy and stuff like that. But if they make the playoffs and then they're not competitive in the NLDS, let's say that, or they don't win the wild card series, I'm not so sure if Seidler will end up firing him. I think he'll say, we made the playoffs. The playoffs are a crapshoot after that. He'll use that argument, and then they'll run it back. He'll maybe he'll live out Bob Melvin's 3-year contract. That's my gut feeling. If he doesn't make the playoffs, then I think Seidler, it's unless, even if injuries happen, that might just be, AJ Preller just not constructing a roster good enough. But if the Padres don't make the playoffs, it's going to be hard for Seidler to talk to the media and explain why AJ Preller is still the GM. I'm a big Preller guy. I have an In Preller We Trust shirt. I wear it to the ballpark every year as season ticket holders. My family has season tickets. I wear it to the ballpark, and I still do want to trust him, right? I think today, I'm not down on him today. The proposed deal that they have, it seemed like the Mets really were thinking about it. When you have reporters saying they were deep in talks, and it's not Bob Nightingale saying it, and it's Dennis Lin reporting that there's been proposals and all that, the Mets were really thinking about taking on Hosmer's contract, which we thought was impossible. They weren't even going to get Robert Hassel III or anyone like that. They take Emilio Pagan off your hands, and then Paddock, who might not even be a huge impact starter if people can stay healthy this year. That would have been a great trade for the Padres. The Padres get back a power-hitting left fielder. You can put CJ at second, Cronenworth at first, and we'll get to that alignment and what could have been. But that would have been a good deal for Preller. The Mets just smartly said no. So I don't fault Preller for saying no, Hassel's, and I assume this is what happened. I don't fault him for saying no, Hassel's not going to be in this deal. No, Gore is not going to be in this deal. No, Billy Epler, CJ Abrams not going anywhere. No, James Wood not going anywhere. I'd be okay with him parting with James Wood if that was the deal breaker, but it seems like that's what they said, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with them not including a top prospect and just going with Hosmer. I understand that Dom Smith would have been better to have, and Hosmer not being on the team would have been great. But if we were going to sacrifice Robert Hassel for that to happen, I'm not so sure I would be all in on that. So today, I don't think it's a massive failure for Preller, based on the structure, the trade structure that we were seeing. That was reported. Moving on here. Just going through the comments. Love is everything says, good analysis, love it. Thank you, I appreciate it. Again, everyone tuning in here, hit that subscribe button if you want to be entered into that Joe Musgrove hat giveaway that I'll be announcing tomorrow. Here's Michael saying AJ Preller sucks. Again, I just kind of laid it out. I understand he's made some bad moves. He's overpaid, but I don't think today was necessarily a terrible day for him. The Mets just realized that they weren't going to win that deal, but they were really thinking about it. And I think Preller was smart to, have limits, and not just be totally desperate. He does have till the trade deadline to get a deal done. Juan says, Dodgers have so many developing good players, it dates back to the 1970s. Yeah. It's just, you look at the rosters, you look at who was homegrown for the Dodgers compared to how many were homegrown for the Padres, and it's really not that many. It's the Dodgers totally outweigh them. I can go through the Padres depth chart right now. Let's do that right now, actually, and compare that to the Dodgers depth chart and how many guys are homegrown. How many guys would I consider homegrown on the Padres roster? And I'll show this to the YouTube audience, the podcast audience. I encourage you to watch, and you can go through the depth chart if you want on your own. But just looking at the depth charts here, okay? Let's see how many players compared to the Dodgers are homegrown by Preller, because that's a big reason why you see the Dodgers with the high payroll, but they're winning, and the Padres with a high payroll, but they're not, and they're not anywhere they're in the same level as the Dodgers, because Preller hasn't developed guys and doesn't have a history of developing guys. And guess what? Because you don't develop guys, you have to go get guys in free agency, and in order to get guys in free agency, you're going to have to overpay. Here we go. Yu Darvish, not homegrown. That's 1. Snell, not homegrown. 2. Musgrove, 3, not homegrown. Clevenger, 4. Paddock, 5. Martinez, 6. Gore is, Weathers is, Reese Kinnear, I believe, is. So we're at 6 right now. Pagan, 7. Pierce Johnson, 8. Robert Suarez, 9. Garcia, 10. Stammen, 11. Hill, 12. Lamet, I think, is homegrown. Chris Matt, 13. Adams, 14. Ray Kerr, 15. Steven Wilson, I think he was drafted by the Padres. Nola 15, Caratini 16, Alfaro 17. Campusano was homegrown. Hosmer 18, Voigt 19, Beatty 20, Cronenworth 21, Abrams homegrown. Kim 22, Machado 23, Tatis technically 24, Profar 25, Grisham 26, and then Myers 27. That's 27 players. 27 players not homegrown for the Padres. Now let's look at the Dodgers, okay? Let's look at the Dodgers roster. How many guys are homegrown? Just to show the difference, because I think it's definitely significant, okay? How many guys are not homegrown? Okay, Mookie 1, Freddie Freeman 2, Trey Turner 3, Max Muncy, I want to count as homegrown because he was nothing with Oakland. Justin Turner, same thing, nothing with the Mets. And then Will Smith, okay. Chris Taylor 4. Bellinger was drafted. And here, let's be nice. Let's actually say who was homegrown and who was not. So Mookie 1, Freddie Freeman 2, Turner 3, Muncy 4, another Turner 5, Taylor 6, Barnes 7, traded with Miami, Alberto 8, Pilar 9, Buehler not, Kershaw not, Urias not, Heaney 10, Kimbrel 11, Trinan 12, Hudson 13, Vesia 14, Gratterall 15, Evan Phillips 16, if you want to count that. Price 19, Anderson 20, and then the rest is injured list. So the Padres have 7 more guys that are not homegrown compared to the Dodgers. And when you add that up, that shows that that's a lot of money that the Padres have to pay for other guys that the Dodgers don't have to. And they can use that money to go spend on Trey Turner or Bauer, for $40 million a year, or Freddie Freeman like they did this year, or Craig Kimbrel like they just traded for. So that's a significant difference. It wasn't as big of a difference as I thought it was going to be, but just going through it, that's 7 more players that the Padres have to pay for that the Dodgers don't. All right, just keep continuing now going to, and yeah, Randall says Dodgers are bullies to the Padres, and it's been like that for a long time now. Jason says A.J. Preller obscenely overpaid Hosmer, Myers, and Pomerantz. He also overpaid Kim Profar. Now the Padres don't have a left fielder or a closer. How can anyone be high on A.J. right now? I understand where you're coming from with that. I'm not saying I'm high on him, but I'm not low on him. Hopefully you understand that. I think you'll be higher on him if C.J. Abrams makes the opening day roster, which I think he has to now, just because there aren't any other options, which I've discussed on previous episodes, which I discussed with John Schaefer on episode 140 that went out yesterday, which you can go check out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Extra 1360s John Schaefer. That was fun to do. So I think fans like Jason will be higher on him once Abrams makes the roster. Once Gore develops, I think you'll be higher on him there. What if Ruben Niebla comes in and fixes Weathers as well, fixes Paddock? I think you'll be higher on AJ then. What if they do have a closer? What if Robert Suarez or Dinelson Lamet ends up being a really good closer? I think you'll be higher on Preller then. I think if Bob Melvin comes in and has the impact that we think that he's going to have, I think you'll be higher on Preller then. So my point is, right now, I understand why you might not be so high on AJ, and I understand that. And look, it's definitely you can have that opinion. I'm not high, like very high on him, but I'm not down here on him either. I'm more in the middle, because I also do realize some of the very all-star caliber players that are on this team would not be on the team if AJ wasn't here, because he's the one that acquired them. And Bob Melvin would not be here. I'm confident in saying that. Same with Ruben Niebla if AJ was not the GM, because AJ's the one that thought out of the box. While all of us were thinking Bochy or, Ozzie Guillen or who else? They were throwing out names. Mark Kotze, I think, interviewed, just different names. No one said Bob Melvin, but AJ did, and he ended up getting it. Ron Washington, another name, but he ended up getting it. So I think you have to give him credit on that. Just continuing moving down here, the comments. Let's see here. JD says, Padres are spending like big market team now though, I think is what he's saying. $230 million with the current roster. Atrocious. AJ can't swim with the big boys. Well, yeah, Jason, yeah. He was saying that, Jason was saying it's large market against small market, and I understand that. But JD is right. The Padres are spending more than they ever have. They went over the luxury tax last year. And by the way, it was over the luxury tax for Daniel Hudson. It's not like it was for Fernando. So that's not a great look. But the thing is, Jason, they're spending like the Dodgers, well, not as much as the Dodgers, but they're spending in that area. They're like a top 5 payroll in baseball. So they are spending like a large market team. AJ's just hasn't, invested the right players, the right money into the right players right now. Let's see here. This is a good point. Zertrus 619 says, you still have to pay to keep your homegrown players, so it comes down to the Dodgers having money to spend. And they do have money to spend. But why is that? Because they've spent the money on the right players. They're not overpaying for utility guys and then just continuing to pile more money onto like fifth starters like with Nick Martinez, who might turn out to be good, but they paid $5.5 million more than they did before the lockout when the agreement happened. So it's just those little things that add up. Oceanside Boy 760 says, will the Padres trade for Brian Reynolds? I'm not so high on that. I don't think that's going to happen. Pirates want Hassel or Abrams, and I'm not giving that up if I'm Preller. So I don't think so. All right, let's get to, more about the Mets here. Why the Mets didn't do this deal. Why it hit a snag, why it did not happen earlier this afternoon. And it's because they realized that it was not a good fit. They realized that this would have been a dumb move. There were Mets fans, some Mets fans that were saying, they were even floating the possible idea of the Mets thinking that Hosmer would have been a defensive upgrade at first base over Pete Alonso, which made me laugh because they obviously hadn't watched Hosmer the last 4 years, or else they would have had a much different thought about Hosmer's defense. They wouldn't have even thought about saying that because that's just ridiculous to think that. I know Alonso isn't, Goldschmidt, but in terms of defense, but still, he's not. Hosmer would not be a big upgrade. Let's say that right now. He would not have been a big upgrade over Pete Alonso. And then they realized that Pagan, he gives up the long ball. They have a pretty solid bullpen. I think they could still add more, but they have a pretty solid bullpen right now. Edwin Diaz as the closer. They don't have Juris Familia anymore, and I know Mets fans didn't like him, so maybe that's a positive. And then, I think they made the right decision by saying that, look, Eric Hosmer, getting that Eric Hosmer contract and having to pay a lot of that contract, $26 million of that contract, $25 million, whatever it was, that's not worth it just to get Chris Paddock back. I understand the Mets, they lost Jacob deGrom, best pitcher in the league, for probably the first 2 months at least of the season. I understand that. with the shoulder injury. But with that said, Chris Paddock's nowhere near DeGrom, and you're not going to ever replace DeGrom with someone who's like DeGrom. It's great that they have Scherzer right now. I know he has a hammy injury, but it's great that they have him. It's great that they acquired Chris Bassett to have more depth. But I think they asked themselves, can we just go get a free agent on the market where we don't have to take on Eric Hosmer, who's not a fit on this team? And can't we just go get a free agent pitcher where we don't have to trade Dom Smith, who could be an asset to us offensively this year? Couldn't we just go get a pitcher that's comparable to Chris Paddock, who's not coming off an injury like that Paddock was coming off of last year? So I think they really looked at it, and it's like, why are we even thinking about doing this? It's not that great of a deal for us. And so I guess props to the Mets for doing that. But AJ, if they would have got this done, I'm sorry, you can't say that this would have been a loss for the Padres. This would have been a win. There were people that were floating, Dom Smith that, could have been the first baseman, slotted in as the first baseman, and he could play first base sometimes, but they also have a lot of guys that can play first base. I think it would have been great. I would have been in favor of them slotting Cronenworth, who's an all-star, who played in the all-star game at first base, slide him over there. You can put C.J. Abrams at second base, have his bat in the lineup. You can have Kim at short, who's great defensively at short, Manny at third, and then you can have a power-hitting outfielder in left field, power-hitting potential outfielder in left field, who's not worse, I would say, than Profar in left or Beatty in left, right? So you can have an outfield of Dom Smith, Grisham, and Myers. That's better than Profar, Grisham, and Myers, right? So that's what I would say to that. And I think that I would have been in favor of Dom Smith as the left fielder. That's what I would have done if he was a Padre. I think that would have definitely made the team better. And I'm not saying anything that probably other Padre fans would have said. He would have made the team better, I think. And that would have given them, we can move into what amount of money that would have given the Padres room. Paddock is making $2.25 million this year. Emilio Pagan making $2.3 million this year. Eric Hosmer, there were reports that this year they would have saved $6 million of his contract this year. But Dom Smith, they would have got him back, and he's making $3.95 million this year. So you add Pagan, Paddock, and Hosmer's contract, and then subtract that total to Dom Smith's money, and they would have saved $6.6 million if that trade would have went down. And we know that was big. The Padres wanted to save more money and get more under that luxury tax so they can go get another power-hitting outfielder or something like that, or improve the roster elsewhere. And I think, or if injuries happen, right, before the trade deadline, they want to make a move. Things happen. And so they want that flexibility, and that would have been huge for them. So if they would have saved $6.6 million around that this year, according to Spot Track, the Spot Track contracts that I looked up, and then I added and subtracted all those players that would have been involved, the $6.6 million they would have saved, you add that to the amount that they're already under the luxury tax right now, and they would be $13 million under the luxury tax. That would have fit Brian Reynolds' contract in with a lot of room still. That would have fit an Austin Meadows contract in with a lot of room still. That would have fit probably a Conforto deal based on the interest that he's getting, which doesn't seem like a lot right now. Especially coming off an injury. That probably would have put him right up against the $230 million, but it would have been close. But at least I think they would have had a better chance, obviously, of getting him with the $13 million of room than they do right now with like $6 million of room, something around there. And so it does limit them, even if they get Brian Reynolds and they get the $5 million of Brian Reynolds. Now you're right up against that $230 million number. And so do the Padres, that just makes it more risky for them. Like, do they really want to do that? Be really up against it and then have to give up an Abrams or a Hassel, or a Gore, someone like that. Do they really want to do that? So that's kind of what I would think. And I think those are my thoughts in terms of the money wise and what they could have saved. And that would have given them this deal. As you can see by the numbers I was just talking about, this deal would have given them definitely a lot more flexibility, and we know with flexibility, Preller loves that, whether that's the luxury tax number or whether that's players on the field, right? With Kim can play multiple positions, Cronenworth can play multiple positions, Myers can play all three outfield positions, Grisham can probably play all three outfield positions, and then Beatty obviously can play multiple positions, Nola can, Caratini, Alfaro. He loves that positional versatility, and they would have had that with Dom because he can DH, can play first, can play left, and they would have had more flexibility as well in the payroll. So that's what they're missing out on in this deal, and it's unfortunate. But I do want to move on to, before getting to the comments and finishing up with the comments, what the players, and I think this is kind of what we should have expected, but according to Kevin Acee, these are some quotes that a few of his teammates, of Hosmer's teammates, said about him earlier today, with those trade talks swirling. Craig Stammen said, quote, "I'm praying that he doesn't get traded," end quote. This was obviously before the deal was reported that it was done and it hit a snag and it wasn't going to happen. "I'm praying that he doesn't get traded." And according to Acee, word got around the clubhouse around 2 p.m. that the deal was dead. The Mets ultimately balked at taking on $29 million of the $59 million remaining on the Hosmer deal, like I was mentioning earlier. Myers said, quote, "Good news," end quote, about the Hosmer not being traded news. Quote, "Sounds like he's going to stay with us, which is great. I think everybody in the clubhouse is excited about that. A great presence in there," end quote. Well, yeah, look, this is expected, that he's loved in the clubhouse, beloved in the clubhouse, but I think Dom Smith would have been beloved in the clubhouse as well. And I think some guys would have gotten over it when they know that Preller's making this move to try to improve the team. So at some point, right, don't you want to win? So, I understand. I'm not in the clubhouse. I understand. And from the outside, I can understand why, some players in that clubhouse, like Stammen, like Myers, like Cronenworth, which we'll get to a quote by him, I understand why some of them, they are speaking glowingly of Hosmer, right? They love him, great clubhouse presence, and all of that. But at some point, don't you want to try to win a World Series? And I don't want to close the door on Hosmer like having a bounce back year or him not helping the Padres win. But based on the last 4 years and based on some of his previous comments about him not, wanting to change and wanting to adapt, it's just hard to believe that. So, and then I guess we can move on to, what Jake Cronenworth said. He said, quote, "Probably the best teammate I've ever had," end quote, about Hosmer. And so obviously those guys in the locker room speak, glowingly of him. But Hosmer being a great teammate doesn't win them a World Series. I think that's the bottom line here. So there's other guys that are great teammates in there. I think Manny's a great teammate, right? I think, there's other guys. I'm sure Darvish is a great teammate. It seems like Snell's a great teammate. So there's other guys in there that I believe that can help the team win. I'm sure Musgrove's a great teammate. Down the line, I could go. I think Melvin's a great manager. Go down the line. Without Hosmer in the clubhouse, I don't think they'd fall apart. You're adding a left fielder, a guy that can help the team win. I don't think they'd fall apart over that. And so it might be, great and all that he's a great clubhouse presence. Cronenworth saying that he's probably the best teammate I've ever had. And that's great for him to say. And I believe what he's saying. It seems like, and I want to reiterate, I've said this on past episodes. Hosmer, I'm sure he's a great teammate. I've had one personal interaction with him when he signed a baseball card of mine with me and my cousin Jacob, who's come on the podcast many times. He signed our autograph 2019, his first year with the Padres, I believe. And he was great, right? It was before a Sunday game. He was great. But so that was the only personal interaction I've had with him ever. So he was fine then. And I'm not trying to say that he's not a good guy with teammates, with fans signing autographs, but he's not, based on recent trajectory, based on projections, based on comments that he said, it doesn't seem like he's, in the same, he doesn't have the same thoughts as the front office. He's not on the same wavelength as the front office. I think he wants to be there in the locker room with the guys, but he's not the best option for the Padres to be their starting everyday first baseman. And that's just the bottom line. It just is. And I'm sure some Padre fans in here, a lot of them probably agree with what I'm saying right now. If anyone doesn't, please let me know. I'd love to hear an opposition's comments to Eric Hosmer, and he would help the Padres be a great, contributor to a Padres World Series roster, but I don't see that. Let's see here. Just moving through the comments here. So, we've discussed a lot here, at the beginning, Manny being ranked ahead of Nolan on MLB Network's top 100 list, Tatis being ranked third. The timeline of events of the Hosmer deal not happening. Okay, Jason says he likes Hosmer. I own a Hosmer jersey. He's just overpaid. His contract's untradeable. Well, do you like Hosmer as a player that can help the team win? Because I don't think he can. He's just not good anymore. And he is overpaid. His contract is pretty much untradeable unless they're going to include one of their top prospects. And so, Jason, if you like Hosmer, the person, the teammate, sure. I like that too. Cool. His politics, I'm not getting into that. I'm not even saying that he's a good person related to politics or anything like that. I'm not into politics, so I'm not really in on that. But I'm talking about him as a teammate, my one personal interaction with him. I don't have anything bad to say about that. His teammates speak glowingly of him. But to like Hosmer as a player, I just don't see why you would. Let's see here. Rome loves Dan. Okay, I'm glad. I want to clear this up. He says, isn't Hosmer's contract front-loaded? It's getting cheaper. It's not. What matters, it is front-loaded. You're right. But what matters is the luxury tax. And for the rest of the Padres contract, or the rest of his contract, that's what the luxury tax is. So, well, not for the rest of his contract, but if he were traded to the Mets, the AAV would have been lower because it's based on the remainder of his contract. But because the contract was signed with the Padres and he's on the Padres, the AAV is what the luxury tax is. And the AAV is higher than the $13 million that he's going to get the next 3 years after this season. It's $20 million. It's like $20 million a year, something like that. Let me see here. $18 million a year. So it's higher than the $13 million that he's actually going to be paid the next 3 years after this year. So I hope you understand that. It's the contract is front-loaded, but that's not what matters. What matters is the luxury tax. The AAV is what goes towards the luxury tax. So Manny Machado, his AAV is $30 million a year. For its entirety of his Padres contract, if he's on the Padres, his AAV that will be going towards the luxury tax is $30 million. And for Tatis, it's 100 or 340 over 14 years. So it's a little over 24 million AAV that's going towards the luxury tax. For Tatis, the whole span of his contract. So I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Jason says, Ben, yes, I agree 100%. I do like Hosmer, but if he can be traded in the right deal, I think it should be done. I think it should be traded as well, and I think it should be in the right deal. I'm okay with having Hosmer on the roster to start the year, and if he's on the roster because they weren't willing to give up on Robert Hassel III and didn't want to trade him, or didn't want to trade Abrams, obviously, or didn't want to trade Gore, I'm actually okay with that. I'm okay with that. Because at least if Hosmer doesn't perform, I know he's taking up money, but if he doesn't perform, at least they have other options. They can go with Matt Beatty against right-handed pitchers at first base if they want to. I know he's probably profiles more of an outfielder, but they can go that way. They can have Abrams at second and Cronenworth at first if they want to, and still have Voit DHing if they want to keep him healthy that way. So I'm okay with that because there's still ways that they can keep him on on the roster, on the payroll without him playing. So, and at the same time, they'd be able to keep their top prospects. So I'd be okay with that. Let's see here. Well, let's start with this one from Dan. Hosmer has a better glove. Smith has a hubcap for a glove. No clue in left field. Not Keith Hernandez or even Hosmer at first. Someone needs to get up in his face and demand a bit more. Hosmer has a better glove than Dom Smith. That's essentially what he's saying here. I don't know how much better it is. I mean, he has a negative WAR defensively in his time with the Padres. Hasn't won a Gold Glove with the Padres. That image that comes to mind, and I'll look it up on YouTube here for anyone that doesn't remember, is Hosmer, dropping that ball. Let's see. Hosmer on that walk-off that Bregman had, where Eric Hosmer just dropped the ball. He didn't even drop the ball. It went right behind him. I'm just trying to look up this Hosmer error and share it with anyone that kind of forgets here. I'm trying to find it. All right, here it is. Yeah, Phil Maton was on the mound. Here it is for anyone who forgot. We're talking about, right? You're saying, Dan, that Hosmer's a better glove. Well, this is the image that comes into mind for every Padres fan, every actual Padres fan. I'll put it that way, because I'm sure people weren't actually watching the team, every game like I was in 2018, its first year. But here was the Hosmer. Here it is. Pop-up, Bregman pop-up. Game, extra innings. Extra innings, and it falls literally right behind him. A pop-up that he should have caught, and the game shouldn't have been over. And he dropped it. Here's another one. Here's a pop-up. I think this was 2020. Didn't even touch it. Look at how bad he is defensively. Look at that. He thinks the game's over, but he didn't squeeze the ball in his glove. Here's the NLDS moment. Grounds out, bases loaded. Here's NLDS. Foot not even on the bag. Here's this one. Going to first. Again, foot. He's late to the bag. Foot not even on the base. It's like this is just repeatedly. There's an error. Ground ball, doesn't get it. And here's Hosmer not running out of ball to first base. Grounds into a double play. I mean, I don't want to just bag on him. I know I am. But when someone says that he has a better glove than Dom Smith, he might. But it's just the proof is in the pudding. He just has not been a great defender with the Padres. He's never won a Gold Glove with the Padres. That's just not the way it is. I mean, Phil Maton, remember that guy with the Padres? That's when Hosmer dropped that ball in that Bregman pop-up. Phil Maton. Christian Villanueva was the third baseman before they got Manny. Ooh, that team. Just kind of go through here some of the comments. Dan here, an actual Padres fan, is like me. I have every game on DVD from the Fox Sports era and hundreds from other years. I've seen it all, humbly said. I love that, Dan, and you're with me, diehard Padres fan. I appreciate that. I assume some Padre fans in here aren't diehard, watch every game, and I can appreciate that too. People have lives. But I'm here as a diehard Padre fan. My family has season tickets. I watch every game. I take every full game that I watch, I keep score of. So I'm fully in tune with the game. This summer, I'll get back home, San Diego, mid-May, so I'll be having some content at Petco Park for you guys this season, and I'll be unveiling my plan content-wise for this season as well before opening day, leading up to opening day, so stay tuned for that. But I'm here not just for the diehard fans, but for everyone. Baseball fans that just want to learn more about the Padres, casual fans that just want to tune in here just to see what's going on with the Padres, hear different thoughts. participate in the chat, the diehard fans that, really want to have great points and all that. I'm here for all of you guys. I just want to put out great content for you guys, and I love communicating with you guys. So I'd appreciate it again if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, listen to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, follow at Talking Friars, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Hit up Gaglione Bros, GaglioneBros.com, our sponsor of this episode and pretty much every episode this whole season. I really appreciate everyone's support. And yeah, Jason, fans like us need to stick together. I agree. Did Dom's tears trigger you? No, not really. I mean, I just didn't agree. Let's see. Yeah, Jason says, hit the like button. I appreciate it. Yeah, hit the subscribe button if you want to be included in that Joe Musgrove hat giveaway that I'll be announcing on the social media channels tomorrow. Again, this has been fun. Episode 141, Talking Friars podcast and YouTube show presented by Gaglione Bros, cheesesteaks and subs. Guess what? I'll probably be back tomorrow after the Padres spring training game. It's a day game tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. I know it would have been better if we didn't have Hosmer on the roster right now. We would have had some more room if we didn't have Paddock, Hosmer, and Pagan. If that deal would have went down, we would have had probably $13 million of room to spend and have room under that luxury tax. But it is what it is. And I'm looking at it from the positive side here. We didn't have to give up Robert Hassel III. We didn't have to give up Mackenzie Gore. We didn't have to give up C.J. Abrams. Didn't have to give up James Wood. And so at least if you want to look at it from a positive perspective, look at it that way. Look at it. We still have Chris Paddock as a depth option, as a piggyback option to start the season. And maybe Ruben Niebla can help him with that changeup and stuff like that. So view it as we take away from this, view it from the positive side of things if you so choose. And I'll be back. Thank you so much again listening and watching to the Talking Friars podcast and YouTube show. You can check out that John Schaefer interview I did earlier this week. Go ahead and you can watch that now or go listen to that interview. That is up, episode 140. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Stay safe. See ya.